You ever have depressions or spells of melancholy?
I'm unhappy right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you like girls?
Of course. But do we have time?
She knew too much, and that's why she never came back from the water. That was the cryptic sentence Tab Hunter uttered in his final interview just weeks before his death in 2018. The reporter thought he was referring to an old movie role until the name Natalie Wood was mentioned, and no one dared to ask another question. Now, Tab Hunter's final whisper seems to reveal a darker secret one he had kept buried for over 3 decades. A man who was once Natalie's closest friend, who had listened to her fears, her tears, and the secrets of her marriage, had finally chosen to speak. Could it be that before his death, Tab Hunter left behind the final clue to one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries? And if he was right, if she really knew too much, then what did Natalie Wood know that the world were meant to hear? The answer lies deep beneath the black waters of that Catalina night, and within Tab Hunter's final confession. Let's find out. That woman was once America's cinematic icon, the one who mysteriously drowned in 1981 aboard the yacht Splendor alongside her husband Robert Wagner. And Tab Hunter, one of Natalie's few true friends, was perhaps the last person who truly understood what she carried with her to the bottom of the Catalina Night Sea. Hollywood, 1955. Warner Brothers was looking to elevate its 2 youngest stars, Tab Hunter, the boy with the angelic face and gentle smile, and Natalie Wood, who had just exploded in fame after Rebel Without a Cause. To boost their popularity, the studio launched a publicity campaign branding them as Hollywood's golden couple. From photos of them holding hands in movie theaters to lavish parties in Beverly Hills magazines like Photoplay and Modern Screen splashed their images across pages as if they were a real-life couple. But behind those dazzling photos, there was no love, only an unspoken deal. Tab Hunter, a gay man in an era when Hollywood forbade such things, needed a public girlfriend to silence rumors. Natalie, on the other hand, needed someone decent, someone who wouldn't exploit her like so many other male actors had. At first, it was nothing more than staged dates complete with photographers, reporters, and PR directors behind the lens. But the closer they got, the more they realized they were both playing roles not in a film, but in their own lives. Natalie once told Hunter backstage during Rebel Without a Cause, "You're the only one here who doesn't want anything from me, not a role, not sex, not fame." From quiet hallway talks on film sets grew a strange bond, something that went beyond love yet was deeper than it. Hunter called her the only friend who let me breathe normally in Hollywood. The closer they became, the more Natalie began sharing the hidden corners of her life, the fights at home, the fear of being controlled, and the things she said she could never tell Robert. Hunter never revealed the details, only saying later, "She told me everything, and I wish she hadn't, because from that moment I knew she would never be safe again." And perhaps it was from those long confessional nights that the secret Natalie Wood carried began to take shape, a secret Tab Hunter would keep for more than 30 years, until he decided to break the silence before his own death. Hollywood summer 1957. Flashbulbs exploded outside St. Monica's Church, where Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner's wedding took place. Black and white photos flooded newsstands with Life magazine's headline reading, "Born for each other, America's perfect couple." The press called it a fairy tale wedding, while Warner Brothers hailed it as a publicity triumph. 2 stars from the same studio, same status, same wholesome image, a perfect script to reinforce the American dream Hollywood was selling to the public. But behind that glowing curtain, Natalie Wood was merely playing the role of the perfect wife in a film she wasn't allowed to walk away from. According to Tab Hunter, one night in late 1957, Natalie came to his house in Beverly Hills amid a heavy rainstorm. She was soaked, trembling, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Tab. I'm not sure if I'm really in love or just acting in a movie that never ends," she said, voice breaking. In the dim light, Hunter just sat silently as she confessed that her wedding had been staged from the start, from the dress to the guest list, even the opening song. Even the kiss in the church was a studio request. She sighed. Their marriage soon became Hollywood's showcase product. In their lavish Beverly Hills home, Natalie lived with Robert Wagner, the man who looked charming on camera but whose eyes were cold in private. He was the perfect gentleman on television, but inside the house, as a maid told the Los Angeles Examiner in 1960, Wagner controlled every detail. Mr. Wagner wanted everything perfect. Even Natalie's wine glass had to sit at the right corner of the table. If she placed it wrong, he would just look at her, say nothing, and that silence frightened her more than shouting ever could. But behind that glowing curtain, Natalie Wood was merely playing the role of the perfect wife in a film she wasn't allowed to walk away from. According to Tab Hunter, one night in late 1957, Natalie came to his house in Beverly Hills amid a heavy rainstorm. She was soaked, trembling, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Tab. I'm not sure if I'm really in love or just acting in a movie that never ends," she said, voice breaking. In the dim light, Hunter just sat silently as she confessed that her wedding had been staged from the start, from the dress to the guest list, even the opening song. Even the kiss in the church was a studio request. She sighed. Their marriage soon became Hollywood's showcase product. In their lavish Beverly Hills home, Natalie lived with Robert Wagner, the man who looked charming on camera but whose eyes were cold in private. He was the perfect gentleman on television, but inside the house, as a maid told the Los Angeles Examiner in 1960, Wagner controlled every detail. Mr. Wagner wanted everything perfect. Even Natalie's wine glass had to sit at the right corner of the table. If she placed it wrong, he would just look at her, say nothing, and that silence frightened her more than shouting ever could. Tab Hunter once visited them in spring 1958 when Natalie was preparing for Marjorie Morningstar. He remembered Wagner sitting in the living room reading a newspaper article praising his wife, while Natalie stood silently in the kitchen, her hands trembling. He didn't say a word, just looked at her. "But that look made my blood run cold," Hunter recalled in a 2005 interview with The Guardian. Outwardly, they remained the model couple. They attended the 1958 Oscars, together smiled for cameras at the Beverly Hills Hotel, radiated glamour everywhere they went. But behind those smiles was a loneliness Natalie could never show. One night, she called Tab Hunter at midnight. "I wish I could be a normal person just one day without playing the perfect wife." Hunter understood she was trapped between two worlds, fame and fear. "He doesn't hit me," she said, "but his silence makes me feel punished." When the marriage began to crack, Natalie wanted a divorce, but Warner Brothers refused. "A breakup would ruin the image the whole system is selling," she lamented to Hunter. The Hollywood Reporter even wrote that the studio was working to help the couple maintain their marriage, which in truth meant forcing them to stay together for publicity. "That wedding was like a film scene that could never be cut," Hunter later said. She was imprisoned in the role of her own life. Christmas 1960 at a party on Sunset Boulevard. Natalie appeared in a red dress, smiling brightly for dozens of photographers. But when the cameras turned away, she leaned toward Hunter and whispered, "Tab, do you know what it feels like to be trapped in a movie that will never end?" He could only look at her, unable to answer. By 1962, when the marriage officially ended, the press once again printed photos of Natalie smiling confidently on the boulevard. But Hunter knew it wasn't the smile of freedom. It was the smile of someone who had just escaped a golden prison. "I married out of duty, not love," she told him one evening in Malibu as the wind made her coffee cup tremble. Robert Wagner quickly returned to glamorous parties, still maintaining his image as a model gentleman. Natalie, after that fake marriage, sank into alcohol, sleeping pills, and roles that grew sadder, as if she were reenacting her own life on screen. To Hollywood, the marriage of Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood was a symbol of love. But to Natalie herself, it was the longest, most painful role of her life, one no director ever called cut on. And from those years onward, she began confiding in Tab Hunter about things no one else was allowed to know, things he would later describe as the secrets that kept her from ever returning from the water. After their divorce in 1962, many believed Natalie Wood had escaped her movie scene marriage to Robert Wagner. But the tragedy was that less than a decade later, they remarried. The press called it love rekindled after the storm. Tab Hunter, upon seeing that headline on the cover of People magazine, fell silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "Sometimes people don't go back because they love, they go back because there's nowhere left to hide." When Natalie Wood agreed to return to Robert Wagner in the early 1970s, her friends were stunned. "Why him again?" one asked, and Natalie only gave a faint smile. "Because sometimes people choose what's familiar, even when it's what once hurt them." That was the same answer Tab Hunter later heard from her one night in Malibu. At that moment, he understood this second marriage wasn't a rebirth, but a repetition of the same tragedy, only wrapped in a more glamorous disguise. On the surface, they were still Hollywood's golden couple. They appeared together at film premieres, walked hand in hand down red carpets, basked in the flashing lights. Life praised them as love that conquered time, while People magazine called Natalie the woman who turned Wagner into a new man. But those who were close to them knew the truth behind the doors of their Beverly Hills mansion, that love was rotting from within. Robert Wagner always needed control over his wife's schedule, her clothes, even the way she spoke. He never yelled, Tab Hunter recalled. He commanded through silence. If Natalie came home late after a shoot, he wouldn't question her or get angry, he'd just stare at her until she lowered her head and apologized. That look was so cold, it made Natalie feel like she'd committed a crime. Slowly, she began asking for permission to live. Permission to have lunch, to see friends, to read a script with a male co-star. In 1961, when Natalie starred in Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty, things crossed a line. The on-screen kiss between them mesmerized audiences, but for Robert Wagner, it was unforgivable betrayal. One evening, seeing their photo on the cover of Photoplay, he threw the magazine to the floor and shattered a mirror in their bedroom. A maid later told People in 1983. He didn't say a word, just picked up an ashtray, hurled it at the wall, and went terrifyingly silent. Natalie sat by the door, hands covering her face. She didn't scream, she just cried without sound, the maid said. Days later, Natalie arrived on set wearing a pearl bracelet that covered her wrist. When the director asked why she was wearing it in a scene that didn't require props, she only smiled. But when the lights hit her skin, the cinematographer noticed a faint bruise, just enough to make everyone on set fall silent. They understood, but no one dared ask. In Hollywood, people were taught to respect a star's private life, even when that private life was a living hell. The more jealous Wagner became, the more fearful Natalie grew. She began refusing roles with intimate scenes, terrified that even a touch might trigger his rage. Once at a party in the Beverly Hills Hotel, a director greeted her with a gentle hand on her shoulder, and within seconds Wagner stepped forward, gripped her hand, smiled coldly for the cameras, and led her away. He could make everything look elegant, Tab Hunter said, but in her eyes I saw a cry for help. Over time, Wagner's jealousy turned pathological. He hired people to follow her on shoots, made surprise calls to the set to check on her, even read her private letters. Natalie confided in Tab Hunter one night over the phone. He says, "I don't need friends, that I don't need anyone but him." Her voice trembled like someone trapped in a windowless room. "If I ever leave, he'll destroy me." After that, the line went dead. Hunter called back, but only heard a busy tone. He later said he sat by the phone all night waiting for her to call again, but she never did. The longer she lived in fear, the quieter Natalie became. She wore sunglasses everywhere, even at night, claiming that flashbulbs hurt her eyes. But people close to her, like the stylist for Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, said they'd often seen faint bruises on her cheekbones and red marks around her wrists during fittings. She always found ways to hide them. Scarves, makeup, long sleeves, they recalled. Occasionally, the press would capture photos of Natalie smiling gently beside her husband. But keen observers could tell her eyes never smiled with her. Tab Hunter, upon seeing those pictures, told a friend, "She smiles to reassure the world, but that smile is killing her." Whenever they met, Hunter urged her to leave. But Natalie always shook her head. "No one will believe me, Tab," she said. "Hollywood loves him. He's the hero on screen, and I'll just be the failure if I tell the truth." She knew too well that the system never protected women, especially those who dared to expose powerful men. Once Hunter visited her at their Beverly Hills mansion on an afternoon in 1978. He said it was the first time he'd ever seen her truly afraid. She greeted him with a weak smile, a dark bruise still visible on her arm. When he asked about it, she whispered, "He didn't mean to. He just forgets himself when he's angry." Minutes later, Wagner appeared, wrapping his arm tightly around her shoulders. "We have no secrets," he said, smiling. Hunter stayed silent, but his eyes said everything. After that night, Natalie withdrew from everyone. She drank more, relied on sleeping pills. Neighbors told the Los Angeles Times they often heard shouting from the mansion late at night, followed by long, eerie silences. When the police came, Robert Wagner always answered the door, calmly saying his wife was just emotional. Natalie would smile, apologize, and say, "Everything's fine." But for Tab Hunter, everything was never fine. He said Natalie once told him something that haunted him for the rest of his life. "If anything happens to me, remember I never go out to sea when I'm afraid." When asked about that line in a 2016 interview, Hunter repeated it softly. "She wasn't afraid of the water. She was afraid of the man on the boat." Later, when questioned about his decades of silence, Tab Hunter simply said, "Because that truth doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the one buried beneath the water." And that was why for 40 years he kept what he knew until death drew near. Because he understood that Natalie Wood was not just a movie star, but a woman forced to perform happiness until the final moment of her life. And Robert Wagner, the man Hollywood still called the perfect gentleman, was the silent storm that dragged her beneath the waves that night in 1981. On the night of November 28, 1981, Catalina Island's sky was shrouded in mist. The sea was calm silver moonlight spread across the water, and the 60-foot yacht Splendor lay quietly at anchor in the vast darkness. There were only 4 people on board: Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and Captain Dennis Davern. The next morning, Natalie's body was found floating near the shore, still wearing a thin nightgown barefoot with swollen wrists and bruised knees. The initial report read, "Cause of death, accidental drowning." But from that moment, all of Hollywood knew this was no ordinary accident. A few days before the trip, Natalie had called Tab Hunter. Her voice trembled a little hoarse, as if she were worried about something. "He wants me to go with Walken," she said. "They say it's just a weekend getaway, but I don't believe it. I feel something's wrong." Hunter stayed silent as a premonition stirred in him. He knew she had feared water since childhood, after witnessing her mother's panic when she almost drowned when Natalie was 5. "Don't go if you're afraid," he said. "No one can force you out to sea." Natalie gave a faint smile. "You know, I've lived my whole life in fear. Maybe this is the only way I can stop being afraid." That night, the Splendor left Two Harbors at 7 p.m. According to Captain Davern, the mood was cheerful at first. Walken, Natalie's co-star in Brainstorm, chatted about movies and the wine flowed freely. But as it got late, Wagner started drinking heavily. He stared at Walken, his tone turning harsh. "Are you here for her or for the film?" Wagner asked. Walken tried to smile, but Natalie knew things had slipped out of control. Davern told the Los Angeles Times in 2012 that there were loud arguments, chairs toppling, and objects hitting the floor. Sometime after midnight, Walken retreated to his cabin, leaving the couple on deck. Through tears, Natalie said, "Robert, please don't do this anymore." But Wagner, drunk and jealous, shouted, "You're always acting even when I love you." Then Davern heard a clack like a door slamming hard. When he ran out, Natalie was gone. Wagner just stood there, a bottle in his hand, staring into the darkness over the water. At 7:45 the next morning, Natalie's body was found drifting near the shore about 200 meters from the yacht. She wore a nightgown, her hair wet and matted to her face, a small rope still tangled around her foot. Strangely, the Splendor's rubber dinghy, the boat she supposedly rowed out on her own, was still firmly attached, with no sign of being untied. Her body bore multiple bruises on her arms, her knees, and especially around her neck. The autopsy report noted no evidence of a direct assault, but the injuries are inconsistent with a typical fall. Wagner told police that he and his wife had a minor argument. Then he went to look for her and couldn't find her, assuming she'd stepped out for some air. But Dennis Davern's account was different. In a 2011 NBC Dateline interview, Davern asserted Wagner was angry. He blocked Natalie when she tried to get to the dinghy, and a few minutes later, I heard a loud splash. When asked why he didn't call the police sooner, Davern lowered his head. "I was afraid of him." When Tab Hunter heard the news, he sat silently in his beachside home in Honolulu. In his final 2018 interview, he recalled, "She was never afraid of the water. She was afraid of the man on the boat." His voice broke. Then he fell quiet for a long time. A reporter asked, "What do you think happened?" Hunter only replied, "She once told me there was something about Robert she couldn't say out loud. Now she doesn't have to." The Los Angeles Times later ran a 5-page investigation listing numerous inconsistencies. Wagner's timeline for reporting her missing didn't match. Fishermen nearby heard an argument that lasted nearly 10 minutes. And crucially, there was no sign that Natalie had tried to climb into the dinghy. A forensic expert named Thomas Noguchi, who conducted the autopsy, told Vanity Fair, "If it was an accident, she would have tried to hold on to something. But Natalie's fingernails had no scratch marks, which means she was unconscious before she hit the water." Amid the public furor, Robert Wagner kept silent. He appeared on television a few months later, saying briefly, "I lost the person I loved most. There's nothing more to say." But those who knew Natalie didn't believe it. She never went out on deck alone at night, especially not when drunk. She'd admitted that just looking at the sea at night gives me chills. Tab Hunter confirmed. She told me clearly that if anything happened, never believe she went out to sea on her own. After the case was closed, Robert Wagner's reputation slowly faded, but the doubts never did. In 2011, Los Angeles authorities officially reopened the Natalie Wood case based on new statements from Captain Davern. This time, the ruling accident was changed to drowning under suspicious circumstances, and Robert Wagner was listed as a person of interest, meaning someone potentially involved but without sufficient evidence for charges. Tab Hunter was 87 then. In a final video recorded by his partner Alan Glazer, he looked straight into the camera, his voice trembling. Hollywood didn't kill Natalie. It just let her die. He paused, then added in a whisper, "Maybe she only wanted to be free." But there was never freedom on that boat. People say everyone on the Splendor survived that night, but none of them ever truly escaped it. Robert Wagner lived on for years in suspicion and silence. Christopher Walken never spoke of it again, and Dennis Davern carried his guilt to the end. And Tab Hunter, the only friend who had heard Natalie speak of her fear, carried that secret for nearly 4 decades until he too passed away on July 8, 2018. Before he died, he left a small note in his notebook with a single sentence, "I still hear her calling my name in the sea wind." Perhaps only he understood that on that Catalina night in 1981, what killed Natalie Wood wasn't the water, but the silence of the man she once trusted, and of Hollywood itself, where everyone has always known the truth, but never dared to speak it. On July 8, 2018, Tab Hunter drew his last breath in Santa Barbara, California at the age of 86. Newspapers like The Guardian and Variety wrote in unison, "He passed away peacefully just as he lived." But those who knew him understood that peace was only a mist hiding something unsaid. In the small house facing the sea, his partner Alan Glazer found an old, worn, leather-bound notebook. On its final page, written in blue ink, was a single line, "I still hear her calling my name in the sea wind." The words are brief, but anyone who reads them knows he was speaking of Natalie Wood. More than 40 years later, Natalie's death still has no answer. The Los Angeles Police Department still keeps the file under renewed investigation, and the public keeps asking, did someone hide the truth? The pieces around that case never fit. A woman afraid of water goes out on deck alone in the dark. The rubber dinghy she rowed out remained tied fast to the yacht. Her body bore many bruises and abrasions, swollen wrists, bruised knees. The alcohol and sedatives in her blood were so high she could barely have stood on her own, let alone left the boat. Every piece of evidence screams this wasn't an accident, yet Hollywood chose silence. Tab Hunter. The one person who truly understood Natalie once said in an interview that never aired she didn't fall into the sea. She was pushed into silence. To him, silence was the cruelest weapon Hollywood used to punish women who dared to speak. Because Natalie Wood was not only a victim of jealousy, she was a woman who held secrets that could have brought down many powerful figures in the entertainment industry. Robert Wagner, her husband, and the public face of Hollywood in that era, was shielded by an entire network of influence. After that tragic night, with a single phone call from an MGM attorney, the press shifted course. An accident under the influence. No one dared mention the injuries, the arguments, or the suspicions. Captain Dennis Davern, the only one brave enough to say he heard an argument and something fall into the water, was threatened into silence. In an audio recording sent to NBC Dateline in 2011, he said, "I told them everything, but when it ran, they cut half my words. They didn't want Robert Wagner suspected." Behind it all stood a system built to protect the reputations of Hollywood's golden men. if Wagner went down many powerful studios, producers and directors would go down with him. Hollywood didn't kill Natalie Wood, it merely let her die as it has with dozens of other actresses when they no longer served the pretty illusion the public wanted to see. Alan Glazer said that in his final days, Tab Hunter would sit for hours at the window watching the waves and talking as if speaking to the dead. He said she still wasn't at peace, Glazer recalled. He said she knew too much, and they were afraid of that. That knowing too much wasn't just arguments, it was personal records, a small notebook where Natalie wrote down every detail of her marriage from being followed to the names of several powerful producers. She planned to use it as evidence if she divorced a second time. But when police searched the Splendor, that notebook vanished along with all her personal belongings. An old source from the Los Angeles Times revealed that Wagner's team of lawyers arrived just hours after the body was found. They demanded privacy protection for the family and took control of the crime scene. No reporters were allowed to photograph the yacht's interior, and no one ever learned what items were confiscated. Someone in the industry said bluntly at the time the case was settled before dawn, before the first light touched Natalie's body. Tab Hunter understood that better than anyone. He himself had once been a victim of the same system, forced to hide who he was, manipulated by the very hands that protected Wagner. But he couldn't bear to see the truth about Natalie buried beneath layers of manufactured headlines. In his final recording, his voice rasped and weak. She didn't die because of the water. She died because of the people afraid of the truth she carried. After his death, the media once again chose the familiar path, calling him the gentle legend who passed peacefully. No newspaper mentioned what he had written in his notebook. Only Alan Glazer at the small funeral read aloud Tab Hunter's final words to their closest friends. "I still hear her calling my name in the sea wind." That day, the wind in Santa Barbara was fierce, and those who were there swore the crashing waves against the cliffs sounded like a woman quietly weeping. Hollywood may have buried Natalie Wood beneath the ocean, but the truth never stays buried forever. The cracks in that glittering facade still leak through every confession, every belated whisper. Perhaps it was Tab Hunter, the man once forced to pretend to love her to hide his own identity, who in the end loved her in the truest way possible through truth itself. Could it be that Natalie Wood didn't die because of the sea, but because of a world where women were never allowed to speak their truth? And could it be that Tab Hunter, a man who lived his whole life in secrecy, was the only one brave enough to shatter the silence and give his lost friend her voice back? In Hollywood, the real stories are always buried with the ones who lived them. Natalie Wood may have died beneath the water, but thanks to Tab Hunter, her secret finally rose to the surface, a warning from beneath the waves that in this city of lights, the most dangerous thing isn't the darkness, but the hands holding the torches. What truly happened on the yacht Splendor that night may never be fully known. Yet, whenever the Catalina sea breeze blows, people still say they can hear the whisper of a restless soul I never went out to see on my own. Hollywood once made them its brightest stars, and then became the very place that drowned them in the darkness of fame, lies, and power. Natalie Wood is gone, Tab Hunter too. But the story they left behind remains a mirror reflecting a glittering world that is at its core heartbreakingly cold and cruel. If you believe that behind every shining light there is a shadow no one dares to tell, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so we can continue uncovering the secrets Hollywood never admits to. Because only when we dare to look directly into the darkness can we truly understand how precious the light really is.